So I want to say hello to everybody and welcome you to the first webinar dedicated to Cloud Security Alliance research papers. I am Elena Gabor. I am a member of CSA Romanian chapter, and I will be the moderator of today's discussion. The topic of our webinar is focused on CSA AI risk management paper and the great work that is being done by the members of AI working group on artificial intelligence. This is the focus for today, but there are working groups on different cloud security topics and cybersecurity related topics. As I mentioned, there's some information before we start. You can also always address question to our speaker during their presentation. So we'll have this webinar has two parts. The first one is related to the paper that I was mentioning and the work of AI working group. And the second part will be a discussion that both me and our speakers today would like to have an interactive connection and discussion on these topics. And with no further ado, I will now introduce our speakers. The first speaker is Dr. Chantal Splace. She is a leading AI expert and senior consultant specialized in compliance for pharma and medtech, with a strong focus on cybersecurity. She is known for her deep technology experience and practical approach. Our next speaker is Toyan, and she drives security and compliance AI adoption through her expertise in cybersecurity, AI governance, and risk management. She specializes in developing and executing AI audit strategies that bring the gaps between cloud security and AI technologies. We have here with us Frederick, that is a consultant for information security for North of Germany. And he advises organization from small and local to international enterprises. And we are still waiting for two other speakers, Akash and Beatrice, and I will introduce them when they will join us. So for the first part, as I mentioned, the first part is focused on the research paper regarding AI risk management. And for this part of our meeting today, I will just hand over to Chantal and to Frederick to complete Chantal's presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this presentation of AI risk management. I was the lead author of this paper, and the goal was to think like the regulatory landscape is difficult. So the goal of this paper was to find a way to make AI safe despite a confusing regulatory environment. So we were thinking beyond regulatory boundaries with safety in mind. Now, this paper was published, I think, in November last year. So a few things already developed again, and I will weave them in, even though they are not in the paper. So those who did read the paper already, they will have some additional goodies in this presentation. And those who haven't downloaded the paper yet, I highly recommend to do so and look into it, but I'll get further on that later on. Yes, my name is Dr. Chantal Splice. I'm the co-chair of the CSA AI Governance and Compliance Work Group, and I'm leading the task force industry. For me, it's very important that theories also have an application, that you can do something with what you think of. So we try to make it very applicable for the industry and usable. I have also my own company in Switzerland, working in technologies and research, and I live part-time in Canada. So that's about me, and let's dive in. So the first concept is about risk and resilience. Most of you guys who are in the risk are familiar with resilience. Now, resilience has different definitions. And risk is clear, resilience is not that clear. And as I said before, like, how do we approach AI risk in a practical way? It's not like that. It's not about clicking checkboxes or filling matrices. It's about like having a handle on the risk. So this presentation builds on a dynamic approach to AI auditing and is applicable across industries and system types. System types, I mean like different intelligent systems, which means it could be narrow AI, ML applications, simple classification algorithms. It can also go into physical agents and agentic AI. Agentic AI is currently the hype word again, or the new buzzword in the industry. And this paper actually already covers auditing of AI agents or agentic AI. Now I would like to go into the definition of resilience, and I called it AI resilience because resilience itself, it's differently defined in different contexts. But this is one of the critical factors to actually manage risks. So it is kind of like has 3 layers. It's robustness to withstand attacks without loss of function. That we all kind of know from cybersecurity. It's the second pillar is resilience to recover from incidents and regain operational functionality. That we also have kind of a relation to. And then the third is plasticity. And this is adapt functionality after an incident by learning from the incident. So that's something new that we have with AI that we didn't have with static systems. And here is also like a major risk in agentic AI and physical agents, because they can learn from previous behavior and they can optimize themselves with evolutionary algorithms or however, but they can evolve by themselves. And we must make sure that they don't evolve in a direction that we neither want nor can control. So these are the 3 pillars. I will come back to them within the presentation a few times, but this should give you a good overview over what I define as AI resilience, because it's really like a 3-layered approach, and it's also associated with risks. Like robustness has a totally different risk profile than plasticity. Then this is the new part for those who already read the paper. It's about rethinking assurance from static to agile. Secure by design is technically vintage. It's built something into a system that is there, won't change, but the rest of the system does change, the environment does change. So it's questionable how much, if secure by design makes that much sense. So with agile assurance, or agile assurance is based on the holistic evaluation, suitable again across industries and including the whole life cycle of AI. This is also something that is not very often looked at, the whole life cycle. We start with models, training, deployment, and then probably like some things after deployment, like monitoring after deployment, but hardly ever looks further into decommissioning, into how users use the system, etc. So in this paper, we went all over the entire life cycle of an AI. And this agile assurance supports this, again, the 3 pillars of AI resilience. So you can have agile security, privacy, whatever assurance. You can insert there whatever fits with your context. And again, agile cybersecurity is withstand evolving threats. This is linked to the robustness concept. And then the agile holistic evaluation. This is like going into processes and have controlled recovery paths in the pillar of resilience. So what we know as a rollback. This can look different though in AI. And then in plasticity, we have traceable adaptation of evolutionary systems. So this is something new that is different from what we previously know in cybersecurity, etc., that we trace the adaptation of a system. So this is kind of like the holistic evaluation, and through controlled recovery pathway and traceable adaptation, you have a way better handling on the processes behind. And therefore, you also have a fairly good handling on actually compliance. So here again, the parts. So the process is understanding the use case of where you implement your AI. It must be understood like if a static process is automated by a very dynamic AI system, it might clash in your company. And there is actually over 60% of AI implementation still do fail. It's difficult to implement a dynamic system on top of a very rigid process house. So it's very important that you do understand which process you automate and compare the dynamic of the process you have with the dynamic of the process you actually need to make the most use of AI. And here a little advertisement. We do have our next paper, should be published by the end of the month, which exactly addresses the processes and how you get from a current process house into a dynamic process landscape. Then we also address in the paper the technology, tools, methods, system architectural knowledge, very important. I was on Sunday in the plane with the software developer, and she said, yeah, she does kind of like program sensors for the German railway. And I said, well, cool. Do you use like ML, Edge ML or something like that? And she said, no, I don't. She didn't even know what that is. So it's very important that you actually are up to date on the current technology, what you all can do with it. And it's actually available. ML on the edge, very powerful too. Then the human skills. We are humans. We will stay humans, hopefully. And we are working with the tool. So we need critical thinking. We need adaptability. And what we need very much right now is cross-domain fluency. So if somebody talks about the sensor and somebody else talks about how to charge the battery of a physical agent, these things are not separate. If the sensor malfunctions, the robot probably goes and charges itself instead of doing something way more important. So things are totally linked together, and we must acknowledge this. And our current structure is we have a lot of experts, but we don't have that many people that have a fairly good idea of different fields. So this is how we must, when we upskill people, we must take into consideration that we have a lot of experts already, but we don't have a whole lot of people who understand the big picture. Then the concept we introduce in the paper is audit the auditor, which means it makes sense to evaluating who evaluates and how your newly product, your system, because it ensures trust in trust in the evaluators ensures that you trust in your product or system or whatever. So the auditor, I'll focus more on this later on. The auditor is already very important, but it's becoming way more important in auditing AI. So the intelligent systems, as I said, it can be narrow AI, some kind of a small little ML application. They can be digital agents that actually can make decisions as an agentic AI. They can be physical agents and robots, or they can be hybrid systems. So this again, the hybrid systems cross over into the necessity to be familiar with a lot of different fields and at a fairly deep level. So the technical backbone of holistic evaluations is this whole list I'm showing here on the screen. And while this list might scare you, it does scare me when I see it on the slide. Humans are able to comprehend complex systems. Look at the picture on the right. At the end of the day, this is a very complex ecosystem. Like you have water, you have underwater, you have above the water, you have roots, you have trees, you have birds, you have deers and other animals, and they all interact. So nature itself is very complex, and all of us go for a hike and look around. We are inherently used to deal with complex systems, also in society. If you walk down the road, you meet so many different people. And my neighbor always said, it takes all kind of us to make this old world go around, and that's true. So again, the interaction is highly important. And while I'm not going into the tech details of all this chapters that are actually described in the paper, it is important that you take the time and just scan through them. They are shorter chapters. They are not pages and pages about each topic. They're short chapters that give you the impression of what you need to know. And if you have to evaluate or even design a system, it gives you an idea what other stuff you probably should look into and start evaluating yourself. So technology right now is evolving so fast that this tech backbone will change, more likely very rapidly. So this is really just a backbone that gives you an idea where to start, what's out there right now, where you can dig further. So I highly recommend to actually go through all the chapters once, just so that you have an overview. And yeah, I probably should mention that our paper is structured in 2 parts. So this is, we have an introduction, which explains the concept. Then we have the overview of the tech backbone. And then we also have a whole section about questions. These questions are not exhaustive. These questions just give you an idea, thought-provoking questions.
And just to mention in there, I want to say that the link to the paper is available in the event details, so you can find there the link to the entire paper that Chantal is presenting.
Perfect. Thank you. So in this paper, we also address human skills. And in audits right now, human skills are, you get an auditor, you live with it. Some you like better, some you like worse. But it's not that you actually appreciate an auditor for his or her knowledge. Usually audits are still considered overhead. So the human skills, and this is not only focused on auditors. This is focused on anybody who designs systems, who deals with systems, etc. So this is actually like probably even the user should have some of these abilities. It's very important that we interact with AI correctly. So what's also described in the European legislation in GAMP 5 is critical thinking. That's one of the cornerstones, and I would say this is very much cornerstone of any interaction with AI too. Collaborative communication. Communication by itself is difficult, even on a one-to-one basis for people. It is what it is. We have a lot of failures because of simple communication. And now collaborative communication takes this even a step higher, that we need to interact with multiple teams, with multiple people. So this is a challenge. Investigative mindset. Why do we need to be like detectives? It's about like to spot the risks where literature doesn't describe risks, like to be aware of connecting dots beyond the beaten track, to be really a detective, like a risk detective, to find risks where other people don't see them, and probably also to be able to mitigate them. Abstract thinking, that's kind of clear again, to be able to sort everything out. Then every person, most likely also most AIs do have bias. People definitely do have bias. And it's not about not having bias, it's about being aware of bias. So that you kind of like, everybody has its own filters. This is a lot about diversity, that we try to get different teams together with different viewpoints. This is to mitigate the bias of each person. It's also important, especially now in the beginning of auditing or designing AIs, that people are aware of their own bias, because as is, it's you might still work alone instead of a team. It is what it is. So this is very important. And then what I already said, the cross-disciplinary fluency. And at the core of it all, it's curiosity and continuous learning. That's the core of it all, to be curious, to dare to ask questions. Like I would, if I would have to describe this time right now, I would say it's the time of asking questions, because we don't know so many things. We are confronted with so many new things. To ask questions, and don't feel bad about asking questions. Now, where does this lead us? It actually leads us to the role of a chief AI officer, because in a company, who can deal with all those things? Like, you have the developers, you have the auditors, you have the technical guys who probably built the robot, whatever. I'm referring a lot to robots because this is probably what's coming, and this is probably our greatest risk down the road. So the chief AI officer is the bridge to operationalize holistic evaluation and coordinate agile assurance across domains and across disciplines. So the CAIO needs to know the technology, needs to be able to communicate with the people, and needs to know the processes and how to adapt processes to make the most out of an AI implementation, that it not only becomes successful, but long-term successful, that the potential can be harvested, and that not only the time to market, but the time in market really can be molded, like that. It's if you develop something and if you put all the money out to do it, you want it to be successful. The CIO is also responsible for AI strategy and AI risk. So it probably is advantage if somebody like that is curious and is a risk detector, responsible for AI governance and compliance. So must also have an idea of the legal and regulatory landscape, and is also responsible for continuous improvement of such system, that they are able to stay long-term in the market, or as long as possible. So this is a very powerful concept, and it actually was, interestingly, it was adopted by the US. They had a memorandum, I think in January 2024, which came into effect in probably March 2024 or April, not sure. And they mandate that all their federal agencies actually have a chief AI officer. That makes a lot of sense, even though the US probably doesn't stand out about regulating AI, but this is a very smart precaution to at least have some control in the agencies themselves. Then let's move to the auditor. I touched those things already in the 2 slides before. It's definitely multidisciplinary expertise. And we try to show a little bit in this paper on the technical part. The process evaluation we'll address in our next paper. Law and ethics is addressed by our sister task force, legislation. They publish papers on the whole legislation stuff. And then something that's not really looked at is behavioral sciences and psychology. A lot of people kind of like push back from that a little bit. It's not about that the auditor needs a shrink, but down the road, probably AI needs one. We need to just see also how AI influences society, how it influences employees, how the dynamics change with working with AI, and how this can be optimized without scaring people. We want them to have them on board. We want them to be ready to be upskilled. A lot of people will need to be upskilled. It's according to, I think, a WEF publication 2025, will be some, I think 70% of people need some upskilling. So we don't want to frighten people. We try to get them in the boat. And there, right now, we have a lot of resistance towards change, which is perfectly normal, but we probably need to reduce that a little bit in order to be able to get the manpower that we still need. And then also audit methods, which is, it's in comparison to all the other stuff, it's one more thing to know. Then, as I addressed already, critical investigative thinking. And here the focus is on uncover hidden risks that are not obvious. Impartiality and independence, no conflicts, obviously, that's clear. Blind spots is difficult. Everybody does have blind spots. This is why down the road it makes sense to work in a team. And this addresses our last point here, team collaboration skills. Most people, and down the road probably nobody, is actually able to do an audit or a development of complex systems by their own. So teamwork is a must for complex evaluations and or developments. And then continuous certification, skill tracking, ongoing upskilling. How is this done? This is still a big question mark. Ideally, we would have a blockchain. Then we have like post-quantum issues. We don't know yet, but this would be the ideal world, that everybody can look up from any auditor. What is the skills? How does he continue to educate him or herself? Stuff like that would be very ideal. As is, we don't have that yet. auditors they are not the most loved people in most companies. It just is like that. Auditors with the full skill set are rare, invaluable, and worth their weight in gold. Most are not yet accustomed to teamwork, and this will mark a cultural shift in auditing. Most auditors are one-man or like probably two-man shows. This will change in the future. Also, auditors become critical figures for governments and industry. Legislation and regulations is hard. It will be hard. And a good audit of a system can down the road mean more than adhering to a regulation and clicking off some checkpoints. So anticipating risks, including business risks, recommending mitigation, and applying the 3 pillars of AI resilience to drive strategic improvement will be paramount in the future. I already mentioned the last 3 points. Training and accreditation shall be tracked. An audit of auditors is essential to evaluate the key soft skills, which an auditor didn't need so far. And that's still the same. Auditors must uphold the highest ethical standards, because trust does begin with the auditor. I think it's very important to see that audits can actually be a strategic advantage and not just an overhead. It can actually set companies apart in their race for products or whatever. And with higher efficiency, higher sustainability, and time in the market, as I already mentioned, a company does have advantages over a competitor, especially actually in all 3 of them. It's just simply an advantage, and if an audit can help getting there, it's very much worthwhile. So this is why strategic audits, even if they are friendly audits, have a high value. They assess processes and available tech for efficiency gains. So probably your auditor is just seeing somewhere else a new technology and suggests how to implement it in your process, in your product. It manages people and workflows for seamless AI adoption. So this is the process part that we have already seen too before, but it comes from the auditor perspective that has experience over industries, over sectors, and often also over different sizes of businesses. So this can be a huge benefit. Enable sustainable AI operations which balance speed and resources. Right now, it's unquestionable the race, be the first in the market, time to market is the big deal. Looking at resources, though, it's the time in market. That's the cash cow that will bring you the money. And even though competition is high right now, it still might be worth to look at sustainability and using the potential of time of having a product a long time in the market. So audits shift from compliance checks to strategic tools that extend market viability and also help the carbon balance. Now, I'm not sure if this presentation will be made available. If it is, there is the paper here with the link actually again. And the outline of the paper, as I said, is the intro, which is very well worth reading. And then getting acquainted with the technical foundations. And then the thought-provoking questions. Technical foundations will change. Thought-provoking questions will change too, but they are meant to give you an idea to think out of the box, to startle, to just ask something that you probably wouldn't have asked, and that might lead you to another question that we didn't even thought of. So it's really just a starting point. It's not meant to be exhaustive. It's not meant that you go to a customer with all these questions and ask them from 1 to n. It's really just a starting point that you can come up with your own questions for evaluating the system you have to evaluate. Then I built a little self-assessment tool with impact risk evaluation, kind of a more traditional thing, but you can choose resilient, robustness, and plasticity to have an idea where the handle is of the 3 pillars. So where you have higher risk, where you need different controls, like you need entirely different controls for robustness and plasticity. So this just makes you think again about what you really do. And I just have some, I just put in some evaluation questions. I made them up. And you can select the technical area that's according to the structure of our paper. And then compliance relevant, I went here with no. I'm working day in, day out in regulated industry, which would be a yes there. With robots, it's definitely a yes. It's probably in most cases a yes, but I didn't want to scare you with too much red. So it's green. And then the business impact, usually it's high. And then as the classical risk evaluation, mitigation strategy, I just put in some stuff in there too, and then solved, not solved. If you would like to have this self-assessment tool, I'll give you my contact at the end of the presentation, and you're very welcome to send me an email and I'll shoot you over the Excel file. Then AI governance. How do you actually do it? How is it done today? Right now it's done security by design. Audits are perceived as overhead. It's a request for explainability, a request or a quest, whatever. And I'll get to explainability later. It's static risk assessments and more or less legal confusion right now. Governance tomorrow is, from my point of view, a resilience first architecture where tested pathways are based on standards, at least going back to standards we have. Nature goes back to a few standards across all species, and obviously it's very effective and it has shown that it works. Then moving audits to strategic advantages. And then with the explainability, the EU AI Act requires for high-risk systems, which a robot in the medtech industry, for example, would be, explainability. Now, Polanyi said about humans, not sure, in the 60s or someone, we can know more than what we can tell. And the same, that's about humans, that wasn't about AI. And the same is true for AI systems. It's just, I don't see that an AI system ever will be fully explainable. And the further we go, the less explainable it will be. So predictability of behavior will be very, very important. And testing of this predictability, testing edge cases, testing stress situations, all this stuff will be very, very important. Explainability as far as possible, yes, but predictability will be hugely important. And then a context-aware and dynamic risk management. If you have a robot in a mine that works for itself and builds a tunnel, well, what can go wrong? It probably won't. Worst case, it kills itself, but it probably won't attack humankind. A robot that looks after patients totally different story. Can make wrong decisions, medical decisions that can affect life or death. So very, very different situations. So being context aware is highly important, and also the EU AI Act points this out. And then the operational clarity, that at least you know what you're doing. Compliance is the foundation, standards is the foundations, not the ceiling. So this is very important to consider. Actually, I did develop a full policy framework around this previous concept. And if you are interested in this approach, I'm happy to discuss this. Now to wrap it up, it's the risk management, agile assurance, and holistic evaluation. Just again, a little overview. It's robustness, resilience, and plasticity. It's rethinking assurance from static to agile. And agile assurance also empowers the 3 pillars of AI resilience. And it's the driving force behind continuous improvement and also sustainable AI integration. Then the foundations here again, the link to our paper, and then the self-assessment tool. Feel free to shoot me an email or connect through LinkedIn, whatever works for you. So the conclusion here is compliance is the floor, not the ceiling again. Resilient, efficient, and sustainable AI systems demand dynamic evaluation. Agile assurance aligned with real-world risks. Audits are an overhead, they are strategic leverage. And take the first step towards smarter AI risk management and request the self-assessment tool. And of course, please read the paper, download it. I would like to conclude here and pass on to Frederick.
Thank you, Chantal. So let me just steal the screen share from you. And let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes, it's visible. And if you have any question regarding Chantal presentation, you can add it in the chat or
All right, so thanks again, Chantal. Thanks, Elena. Yeah, I'm Frederick. I'm in the same working group, in the same task force as Chantal. And I want to tell you a little story about our research process. So when we have a new idea, when we see a problem that needs tackling, that needs solving, we spend literally hours just researching a certain topic or an idea. And this time is very intense because we see a lot of different things. We research in papers, we see other sources, we see videos. So a ton of different kinds of content, tons of ideas hidden in that. And we, in the end, have to focus on one thing. But we still see a lot of interesting things, and we kind of map out a certain territory. So everything in the governance and compliance region, we dig down a rabbit hole. But this also means we see a lot, but we have to focus on one thing. So a lot of time is actually not in the paper in the end. So about 60% of the time, I would say, is time spent on reading, on seeing, on researching that doesn't actually end up in the paper. And we see a lot of resources that may be very valuable for others, but not for us. And we want to share these resources. So the research time that we have spent, that other people have spent, is not going to waste. So we have built a hub with all the resources that we have seen, that we've come across. And this hub contains all kinds of different things. You have everything filterable by different tags. So we have a topic, different topics, we have different types of publications which you can find in this hub, and a focus on the different regions. So for example, the EU AI Act is more interesting to people working in the European Union and developing things for the European Union. So it's tagged with legislation in Europe. But there's really all kinds of content in here. And you can filter through this content. I will give you a link to the actual hub later on. So you can filter this content either using by filtering by tags. So for example, if you just want to see policy, or by the other focus areas, which are either tagged or not. So you can do a free text search as well. And if you found an entry that's interesting to you, you can click on the little expand icon, which is just left to the name of the entry. And then you will see a whole bunch more. So you have a description, which is either coming from the publication or we have written one. Then you have a summary from an LLM and a kind of list of key points that the LLM figured would be something that's in the document, something that's interesting, something that sums up the contents, plus some other metadata. And well, what should you do with all these information with the hub? Well, you should definitely use it because it saves you a ton of time and it speeds up the research process tremendously, actually, because you don't have to dig through the whole internet to find different research papers, publications from companies, white papers, frameworks. That's already in there. And that helps you exploring the connections between different topics, which again, the text can be used for as well. Of course, we don't want to stop there. We do have a wish list and a little roadmap for the hub. And the first item is we want to let you be able to find related material to certain links. So for example, if you have the risk management framework, AI risk management framework from NIST, then you should be able to see other connecting knowledge from the same domain, other frameworks, so other interesting approaches. For example, did you know that Malta has its own AI strategy with its own kind of framework and risk and ethics framework? That's something you should be able to see with the hub. Another point is we want to make the contents available via API. So for example, if you have a focus on legislation or on AI safety, then you should be able to just use a bot that's connecting to the research hub to query all the information tagged with legislation. So you always know when there's new content being published and you don't have to go through the hub yourself because things are changing so frequently, so quickly, you can't keep the pace if you're doing it yourself. You need some kind of automation, which also brings us to the next point. We want to have more automatically filled fields. So you've seen we have an LLM which generates a summary, which generates some key points, but there's just so much more that you're able to do because the LLM just does it in the background. There's no human labor. Ideally, there's no human labor involved. And the most important item on the wish list, the most important thing on the roadmap is actually you, your time and your commitment, because this project is intense to keep up. It needs a lot of time to take care of, not only new content that needs to be added, but also the enhancement that we want to have, the roadmap that we've laid down. So if you're someone who wants to get involved, then please get in touch using Circle. You can use the QR code that brings you to the CSA Circle page to sign up and get in touch. And if you want to visit the hub, then feel free to visit cloudsecurityalliance.org/AI governance compliance resource links, or again, use the QR code here. And that link will bring you to this overview page. You can either use that view to navigate through the hub, but if you want to have a whole tab with all the information. Then you just go to the lower right-hand corner and click View Larger Version. That will bring you to the enlarged view that I've also shown in this presentation. That's all from my side. Thanks again. And I would say if you're someone who wants to help with the hub, then please get in touch, use Circle or LinkedIn.
Thank you. I think that it's a wonderful idea, and I didn't know until now. So I think that is a really good use of resources, and I totally agree with you that it's really important to help and to help each other and understand how can we prepare. And basically, this was, as I mentioned in the beginning, the idea of today's discussion. Again, just a reminder, if someone has a specific question on the hub or on the paper, you can just unmute yourself. And if not, we have the second part is an open discussion with all the speakers. And I also want to ask before we start the Q&A, we received some questions through the registration form, and I will address that question to the speakers. And I also would like to ask Stoyin if you want to have a specific remarks before we can start the Q&A session, and maybe highlight a bit of your work around consultancy and what is right now the trend in this area. If not, we can to the...
Sure, thanks Chantal and Frederick for your presentation. Just like Elena has said, my experience has been with creating AI security frameworks based on my risk and governance framework experience. And at the moment, I'm doing an AI amnesty for a food retail company. Most people eat pizza, so it's for a pizza company. And what we're working on at the moment is understanding the tools that fit into the supply chain processes, and then streamlining that and identifying the risks around AI usage in supply chain centers. So that's what I'm currently working on actively, and I'm glad to be here to be part of this panel. So I'm happy to go to the next step, Elena, for the open discussion.
Sure. Let me bring the question box right now. So as we don't have any specific questions now, I will start with the question as mentioned, the question from the box. So the first question, and this is addressed to all the speakers, and you can choose if you want to answer that or you want to refer to another colleagues. So the first question will be, in the context of critical infrastructure, how can existing AI risk management framework be adapted to address both traditional threats and emerging AI specific risks such as hallucination, data poisoning, or adversarial attacks?
I can take the question.
Please.
Emerging AI risks are on different levels, and they really have critical infrastructure. A lot nowadays is critical infrastructures, from the food chain to hospitals to electrical grid. And we have to see the risk in a in a very context specific context, yes. And probably we also have to think beyond certain concepts. Not everything that is a buzzword right now might be as bad in the real in the real world as it is discussed in the broader public. So there is a difference. And AI risks, as I mentioned, they will go beyond our current risks, and I would say one of the bigger risks is the interconnectedness of systems, and that systems talk to themselves probably without our understanding or even knowledge. This is for sure a risk that is new to AI, and we have also the evolutionary risk in AI. So we are faced with a lot of new risks, and this is why this detective investigative thinking and being a risk detector is so highly important, because we will have new risks.
Frederick, if you want to continue.
Yes, so kind of seeing in the critical infrastructure part of the question, I would try to, as long as we don't have reliable safety mechanisms and a continuous monitoring for AI systems, I would try to keep AI out of the critical infrastructure as much as possible. It is possible to use to create certain outputs, for example, which are not directly connected to critical systems or critical infrastructure. Because the more critical infrastructure you have, the more monitoring, the more protective measures you will need to create. And regarding AI, some of these safety measures don't even exist yet.
And on that, I was thinking on Mitra framework and Mitra TPs for different tools that you assess from a cybersecurity perspective. And I know that last year, if I'm not mistaken, they published the Mitra Atlas that is specific to AI techniques and tactics. And again, if I'm not mistaken, more than half of those TTPs had no mitigation identified. So I think that this is like a further confirmation that we are not in a place where we can clearly identify the mitigation to first to identify like a clear risk, and the second one to identify the mitigation, and that way to make sure that we have developed the proper safeguards and the proper measure in place in order to integrate an AI system within a critical infrastructure or within another domain, not necessarily critical infrastructure, but if anyone else, including the public, has a different opinion, please go for it and unmute or raise your hand, and I will unmute you. If not, we can go to the next question that we've received during registration. I just check. So the next question is relating to what are the best practices for auditing black box AI system? How can we ensure the effectiveness of such audits when full access to training data models or internal process are limited or unavailable?
Yes, I'll start again. I'd say it again, like this is this predictability over explainability. We will have more and more black box systems, especially if we start to combine AI with other training methods. It's not getting simpler, it will get more complex. And I think we need to shift a rigid form of explainability to predictability. But I'm curious what the other ones have to say about that.
Yeah, I tend to agree. So reliably auditing a black box AI system is it even possible? I'm not sure, because the way AI works, there are no static decision. It really depends on the prompt. Just a minor change in the prompt can change the whole output. And yeah, the only thing you can try is to get as close to the auditing result, as close to the AI ability exploration as possible by using different prompts, by trying different methods, different inputs. that really is the only way that works, in my opinion. So continuous monitoring, continuous prompting in the case of LLMs, and continuously checking and monitoring outputs versus inputs.
Thank you.
Yes, I think it's really important to test edge cases. Edge cases in this respect are interestingly variations of the same thing too. And then in the case of physical agents, it's also the guardrails, like how far can an arm reach, and then making sure that whatever is in the reach of the arm and whatever the joint allows, like our shoulder has some kind of a limit, but a robot doesn't have necessarily. So the whole range of motion to explore stuff like that, like and then putting the whole system under stress. We've seen that LLMs react differently, and they start lying if you put pressure on them. So really stress test the thing. I think testing will be way more important than trying to figure out explainability that I don't think will be able.
You. Now we can move to, I think that this should have been like the initial question. What is the first step when you are looking to integrate AI technology within your current security governance framework? Like what exactly will be like in your experience, like the first step to build a...
Yeah, I'm happy to take that because it's what I'm doing at the moment with one of the clients that we have in our portfolio. So the first step we've recommended is looking at the landscape that you have generally and understanding where the AI technologies can be either an add-on with regard to your processes or introduced newly. So understanding the AI landscape that you have and then assessing the risk based on the current security governance framework that you have. And if you don't have a current security governance framework, I think the first step is actually stepping back, creating the security framework, then adapting it for the AI usage. And then the usual question is, how do you then identify the risk? So they're different, and Frederick had already mentioned, the injection of any either biases or vulnerabilities within AI systems. So that's something you have to cater for also. So the usual GRC processes, and then looking at the edge cases. So what the unique security risks will look like if there are data biases within the system, if there are algorithmic vulnerabilities, and if there are any adversarial attacks that will be introduced based on either introducing AI or having an add-on. And then also with the compliance, we've talked about the EU AI Act. So looking at what the compliance with that regulation or other legal landscape regulations look like. And then creating a clear chart for developing an internal governance framework based on existing legal frameworks and unique works within the industry that you're in or within the corporation that you're working in.
I think you said something very, very important about like identifying risks. It's also in the NIST framework 2.0, right? Like this identification is so important. And in cybersecurity, it's simpler because either data is being attacked or not attacked, whatever. In AI, this even the identification is difficult because, I mean, for example, bias. We have seen that in the past, we stumbled exactly over, for example, bias, and nobody knew it. Nobody was prepared for it. It was nothing that somebody did intentionally. It was something that happened. So to identify risks for the future, now we know, okay, bias is a problem. But for the future, what kind of problems do we have that we are right now not aware of? So identifying risks is so important.
I totally agree with that. And to go further in the discussion, mainly the next logical question will be: who should identify this risk, and who, from I don't know, from a upskilling perspective and from career perspective, what do you need in order to be, I don't know, chief AI officer, or to prepare for different job openings that are currently on the market? What will be like your best place to start on that item? Because in order to identify a risk, as well as in cybersecurity, you'll need to have the proper team, the proper professionals. And one of the question was related to if you are a CISO, who basically you need to hire to have on your team, or who from your team should be trained to upskill to can take over and can lead the AI topic within your organization.
I think with organizations
I'll start with.
Oh, no, go ahead, Chantal. Okay, what I was saying was, even though we are recommending a chief AI officer, what the reality is a lot of organizations don't have the budget for that. So it will fall within the CISO function. And within the CISO function, you have the data governance team, and they can be upskilled with AI model security, system resilience, which is part of what they do at the moment, ethical AI practices, which Chantal had mentioned previously, and then a bit of monitoring and evaluation, where there's continuous M&E and regular assessment of AI systems, current processes to identify and mitigate emerging risks. So I'm answering the question in the scenario where there isn't a budget for a chief AI officer, because that is actually one of the persisting
the scenario where there isn't, because we are cybersecurity professionals.
Exactly.
With no budget for having more people or having skilled people.
Yes.
And we had like a lot of discussion within cybersecurity that we need more professional, and now it's all this AI. So the shortage of specialists was already here, and with AI, and with not only with AI, with all the things that we need to consider prior to develop these technologies and bring them within our organization and also within our institution. It's a big issue to understand who you need like to identify within your team. So you don't have the budget, you need to go and look at the people that you already have, and
Yeah.
you are going to the legal team and you say, please assign someone to consider ethical AI. And for ethical AI, I'll have like later another a question, like ethical AI is a really important area, but basically, and this is a personal question, who will pay for that? Because for ethical AI, like, you basically don't have a commercial output. Basically, it's of everyone's safety, basically, and our rights, our personal rights involved, and basically, who will pay for that?
So what I've recommended in the past with ethical AI is going through the DPO office. There's already budget for that in most companies. We're mandated by GDPR to have a DPO. So it's either upskilling the DPO for the ethical AI piece, because it all ties back to the data at the end of the day. If there's a data breach, the organization pays the fines as dictated by the GDPR regulation. So that alone is proof of the fact that that role is important because of the risk of breaches and fines. So that's where I usually would advocate for either upskilling the DPO or assigning someone within the governance team to understand ethical AI and then incorporate it as part of their workload, which it's adding more workload to people's, day jobs, but this is the industry that we're in at the moment.
Yeah,
I would also add the business aspect. If you deploy unethical AI, you're like in this society, your product will be out of the market in no time, like yesterday. So if you want to have time in market and not just paying for all the development costs, you make sure that your AI is like up on ethical standards. I think this it should be at least a very high business priority. And I agree that the CISOs they are capacity limited and everybody's kind of capacity limited, but this will be a whole shift or it must be a whole shift in organizational structures, because if we deploy AI, it changes so much. Like CISOs are used to see the robustness of a system. They are just not trained and not used to go beyond and see the risks of resilience or process stuff and then even plasticity. A lot of CISOs, some do that and a lot don't. And what I also wanted to mention is what you are doing, Toyin, like with the third parties. There is a lot of third party stuff out there. And I've heard last week from a museum how, like a fairly big museum, that how they use third party tools to protect their art. And this was impressing how all these third party tools are working together to come up with I must say, a really very good strategy to protect art. So I think we must leverage what is out there and not trying to reinvent the wheel all by ourselves. And that again makes like better standards, builds on a more solid foundation, and we can all grow together and build our own business on top of that.
Next question also relates to AI governance, but I think that in some measure you already respond to it. What is the major threat of not doing AI governance right the first time? I'm trying to imagine how you can patch an item like this in an organization after you deploy an AI technology for a few months, for example, and you let it loose to your data and all of that, and how do you patch it afterwards?
I'd say if you do it right and it's continuous improvement. But Frederick, you go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the products, including AI, need to be just rigorously tested. That's a must, because you as Chantal said, you can't have a product that's so for example, politically incorrect, that's just hallucinating, so that's spreading the wrong facts, that influencing the users to a degree that they don't even realize, which also would be a prohibited practice in the EU AI Act. So testing, tons of testing. If you need to patch, you would, I guess, replace the model, but I'm not too big into the technical details. But yes, that can be difficult, especially if you have a model that is continuously improving, continuously learning from inputs. Then you of course need to untangle that somehow, which is, I would say, impossible.
And I am just thinking that you already provided the data in there is like a bit difficult on that, tracking on that elements and what was altered during the process. I'm not sure if it's like a reversible process.
I don't think it's reversible, but you can untangle it a little bit by having the model independent of the weights. So there is some entanglement possible, but still, yes, it's the weight. This is continuous learning. What went in. So
next question is also related to the focus from the clients or the market, and maybe this will be a question for you, Toyan, but also feel free to also answer Frederick and Chantal. What are the top requirements or priorities that a client is looking now when they hire like an external consultant? So moving a bit to the external help that can be brought in by an enterprise.
So my experience that I'm currently making with customers I'm working with is cross-disciplinary concepts, that you have an idea about cybersecurity, that you have an idea about processes, AI, and also the legal aspects of stuff, plus a relation to business and not just regulation. So I think this what I see the most as being a consultant in the daily life is this request for multidisciplinary approaches and thinking across disciplines and connecting dots. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I agree with Chantal. So from my experience, I did the same thing. Most AI consultants have either a cybersecurity background or a governance, risk, and compliance background. And what companies are looking for is understanding, like a well-rounded understanding of those principles, then understanding the AI and machine learning concepts. So knowing what the deep learning frameworks are. You don't need to know them, as an expert, but knowing about them helps with having conversations with the engineers that actually deploy them. And then data engineering skills on my end, I have data engineering experience with data warehouse and cloud platforms. So that helped a lot because I could understand where the live data sets were, understand how to perform the data cleansing so that the quality of the data was proven, and then it helped with the AI add-on. And then I have a software background in Python, so that I found that also helps because it helps with the data visualization and dashboard sharing. So that helped me personally. I'm not sure if that's a huge requirement, but I find that it's a good add-on. And then with the industry experience generally. So depending on what experience you've had so for me, I have experience in retail, pharmaceutical, and data. So I let that come through, and then it helps with having conversations with companies that have those needs within their set businesses.
And an initial assessment will start with a repository of what is currently in their organization, like something similar. I am thinking about regulation and about the EU AI Act, and comparing it to the GDPR regulation, where the first step will be like to have a repository with all the processing information. And I'm thinking that maybe something similar is needed to have in order to start a consultancy project within an enterprise. Is that the initial step in order to?
Yeah, that's a good shout, Lena, because I think what GDPR has done for us generally has been to help with thinking about how to meet regulatory obligations, and it's sort of trained the industry into thinking regulation first and then tools after. So that's also a good add-on.
I'm thinking about the data because I think that, at least from my experience, that was a moment in which everybody discovered that they have data that they don't use, data that they didn't know that is still within their organization. And I think that is pretty similar. I think that the speed for AI is way faster, and implications are bigger. But as I said, for me at least, is like something similar with what was done in preparation to, just from a compliance perspective, to GDPR.
In this respect, it's very important that data is before training, it's anonymized, because like the GDPR has the right to forget, and once something is in a model, there is no way this model will forget unless you erase all the weights, which is way too expensive to do. So it's still scrambled around in there, but then jailbreaks did show that you can extract certain things that is not very fortunate to extract. So that's something with the GDPR, we just go and delete the record. It's still hard enough, right, with deleting stuff back on backups and stuff, but it was technically possible. In AI, it's technically not possible anymore. So this is why data has such a big importance, because we need to know what's going in there and how it is going in there, because otherwise it might show up somewhere where we definitely don't want it. And we can't apply the right to forget to a trained AI system or a system that keeps on learning. So if you download an AI tool that helps you with whatever, gardening, and you tell the AI tool all your garden stuff, and then it learns from that and realizes, oh, you have this plant there and you have that plant there and they don't like each other. And then you unsubscribe from the service and you ask the AI to forget. Well, it cannot forget. It will remember your garden in one way or the other. So this is something that people have to be aware of.
I think that just greatly underlines how important data governance for successful AI projects is, amongst many other things. But it's really, really important to have a solid data inventory, and also, as Chantal mentioned, solid anonymization. Not only pseudonymization, because that can lead to the system identifying people through the different things that it knows. So for example, if you just scramble up my name, but keep all the other attributes, what I do, for example, where I live, then you would still be able to identify me.
Now it's all the risk. I was thinking with getting back with something that Chantal, you mentioned at the beginning regarding our preparation, and you said something that I have a note in here, that is the time for asking question. And I was thinking about the selling proposition of AI system that is going to do all our work, and we'll have like a magic conversational body that will like ask them how to do our daily jobs, and like basically how to, as you mentioned, how to do our gardenings and stuff like that. And now the idea is that the work that we are supposed to do is way bigger that was initially advertised, and also the risks are even bigger. So I don't know if you are like from a, I don't know, business perspective, how would you address, will like do you think that is better for the moment to stay a bit back and maybe miss like some market opportunities on AI, but to build your product safe, or you just need to understand how can you properly preach that you need a clear team and clear research in order to develop safe AI products and tools. And this is for all of you.
Yeah, so we're already seeing, especially from more regulated industries, like, for example, healthcare, from automotive and space and defense, that AI solutions need to be compliant, and that there's the hype of AI being the everything solver is slowly calming down. We still have tons of tools popping up every day, but for something to be of use in a regulated industry, it needs to be compliant, and you need to be able to audit the compliance of a system to be able to use it in a production environment. So I would say, depending on where your focus is, yes, wait and truly develop the product, instead of pushing it to the market, because you will receive a pushback, especially if you're trying to work in a regulated industry.
I agree with Frederick. It's, if you look in nature is developing very slowly, but very steadily. And it survived a few million years now. If we push AI to the edge and try to get as quick to the market as possible, the likelihood that a product will not stay in the market very long is very high. And that you get this pushback, that if the landscape changes, you end up with a non-compliant product. This is why we also suggested this paper about going beyond compliance. But I agree, it's not being the first in the market. I think the one who wins is the one who is the most steady in the market and does continuously improve, actually in all fronts, especially also safety and being compliant, and a tool that also the regulated industry can use, and that slowly has the chance to become a standard.
And now maybe for a build up on this question and build up on the regulation side, what do you think that is like still needed in there? And we have like a lot of AI related legislation that is currently built, and do you think that is like something that should be addressed like on different locations, or it should be like somehow get a, I don't know, not a global consent? I don't expect that in this time. Definitely not on AI, but maybe on different specific, as we have in Europe, we have different regulation in Asia Pacific areas, in America, in Canada. What should be like from a regulation perspective, like, I don't know, collaboration and coordination on the regulatory pieces in order to ensure the safe development of this type of technologies and the implication within our lives to be somehow assessed prior to welcome them, and maybe restrict a bit our area of action if we do this, if we take into the consideration the regulation, the legislation after we welcome these technologies in our lives.
I think the regulation will be lagging behind, especially with frontier models. We have extremely high risks. Global consensus, questionable, because different countries push into different directions. We can learn, though, from each region. Like the US is actually capping compute. So they're capping the power with which you can train models, which makes sense because you can't train bigger and bigger and bigger models. The Chinese countered that with being more efficient with, for example, DeepSeek. So we can learn from the US that we probably don't allow unlimited compute, which also means unlimited power and emissions that go into AI models. Then China, on the other hand, it controls the models. much more than the US, and we can learn from them. You can bet that the Chinese model will be aligned. Like a non-aligned model in China is not surviving. But we do have huge alignment problems with frontier models, which is a huge risk for humanity. So we can learn that from the Chinese. And then Europe in particular protects the human rights. And I think this is what we can learn from Europe, that how important it is to protect human rights. So ideally, we have a consensus which take all three of these aspects in, and probably some more, together. Chances that this will be happen anytime soon, my perspective is rather small. And then what do we actually have? I think the most powerful we do have are responsible scaling policies, where each company tries to have its own governance and have kind of a stop switch, where they do not go beyond certain risks. Is this feasible from a business point of view? In some companies more, in some companies less. Again, there is risk, but it's better than nothing. And there also would come in like third-party auditing, which could be requested by governments. In more corrupt countries, this is probably more difficult to obtain a fair audit. In most countries, though, most Western countries, it's probably you can depend to a certain part on third-party audits, so that the responsible scaling policies together with third-party audits would be an intermediary solution for now. What I've seen, there is nobody coming up with anything that works for everybody as of now, and we'll see what the future brings.
Maybe tapping into what you've said, Chantal, about audits. So we know there are a few frameworks which try to regulate and audit artificial intelligence, like ISO 42001. But when you take a look at these, actually, there's already outdated stuff in there, because these norms cannot evolve as fast as technology does. So I think while you can get a good inspiration for example, an AI management system like you have for a quality management system from such standards, if you're auditing, you need to be on the edge. You need to be up to date as an auditor, and you cannot rely on existing standards. You always have to look into 7, 8, 9, 10 places at once to be up to date about risks, about attack vectors, and about the current trends and what's happening in the AI world.
But how can you do that? Like, what are like the main, I don't know, you work in cybersecurity and you have like some main type of certification for each area. You have main, I don't know, as I mentioned before, you have MITRE to better understand the threat. You have FAVAS to better understand the vulnerabilities and so on. Where do you need as an AI auditor to like start the certification roadmap, your personal certification roadmap, your training, your like framework initiation, and also keeping up to date what are like the main sources for that, besides asking generative AI for guidance. And I don't think that is a good idea right now. And basically, this is the reason why we have like this human discussion on this topic.
But this is why we have our hub, like
Yeah.
where you actually can find a lot of resources.
And regarding certification, is something that you are aware or specific on AI auditing?
I'm not aware of any certifications.
Yeah, I think it's a bit too early in the game to have AI certification specifically for auditing. What we have seen is the provision of AI upskilling with regard to understanding it generally as provided by cloud producers. So you have Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and other companies that have created tailored programming so that people can understand it at the initial step and know what minefields to look out for, know what to understand. But with regards to specific AI audits, certification, I don't think we'll see that anytime, at least not this year. Maybe I'm being pessimistic, but I don't think we'll see something this year yet.
Well, I must say that our company or my company tries to develop an educational program. So we are on it, we have it on the radar, but we are not quite there yet.
You would give us something this year, Chantal.
And the Excel file and getting back to that, because I'm sorry if I'm like remembering stuff and like getting back on that. So you've presented at the beginning of our discussion, you presented a draft version of a self-assessment. And the question that I kept in mind from that moment was like the moment when you need to do that self-assessment, and it's like a continuous self-assessment that you are doing when developing an AI solution.
Yes, I would say so. So it's not like assessments are not static anymore. With like software is not static for a while now, and so assessments shouldn't be either. So the self-assessment, especially for evolving tools, etc., or evolving risks. So this assessment, they already can give you a fairly good idea, I think, where your major risks are. It's not that it's one thing for all solution, but I think it gives you a pretty good idea. And it gives you also an idea where you need to take action with third parties, where you need to take action with thinking out of the box and finding other risks that you probably, if you have plasticity, you probably want to have a team that talks about this and like with very diverse backgrounds and different filters and different questions. So again, I'm going back to asking questions. I think this is the age of asking questions. And very importantly, don't stop asking questions.
I think this is a really important element to consider. And as I said, it's a bit, I don't know, ironic compared, I totally agree with you, but it's a bit ironic compared to the selling proposition of AI system that will answer all of our question. And I think that this is important to have these talks. And okay, we are discussing like to better identify business opportunities for us as a cybersecurity specialist, as an auditor, but also to understand for us like on a personal level that we have some knowledge and that we can use that knowledge in order to make sure that we are doing this I don't know, evolutionary step in the right way, or at least we are considering, as you mentioned prior, we are asking amongst us and maybe among our colleagues the right question, and not just pushing to have something on the market or just assessing from I don't know, an Excel perspective. I also from a personal perspective, I was thinking that the AI will like move us a bit from the register that I was mentioning when remembering the GDPR audits. But I think that, as you said, questions are important, and also having an Excel with the right question in there is important. Maybe it's out of date. I'll give that to anyone that wants to challenge that, but I think that is from an assurance, and you also mentioned this from an assurance perspective. I think that it's important to have it there. I will ask again if anyone has any questions. And if not, I know that Chantal, you asked us for 10 minutes prior to the deadline, so to say. So I'm not sure if you want like to have a some closing remarks and like, I don't know, some guidance for the future prior to, please reach out to the Cloud Security Alliance working group and check their amazing work. And that is my takeaway. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the event, the whole reason why we are the Romanian chapter of Cloud Security Alliance thought to initiate this discussion around the paper and the research that you guys are doing.
Thank you for everybody who was here and attended this webinar. It was a great pleasure. Thank you for having me here. It was a great pleasure to present today here. Thanks you.
Thank you. And also to Jan and Frederick, if you have some closing remarks, or if we still have like 10 more minutes, if you have like some experience that you want to share with the public or expectations. So basically we have in here, the public in here is basically cybersecurity specialist, and if you have like a specific expectation from this industry, and if you want to share it with us.
So regulation and governance and compliance is just beginning to develop around AI. There is no established framework, there is no established standard. What we have is a ton of different ideas for and from a ton of different industries. And as of now, you need to check which of these approaches works best for your use case to be compliant. And it's always use case and product dependent, in my opinion, because we don't have a lot of fully grown standards as of now.
Thank you. Then if you want to continue and like have like some conclusion and like expectation in our work field.
Well, it's just to thank everyone for being on the call and being part of the webinar. And Frederick, thank you for your presentation. I know Chantal has left, so also say thank you to Chantal. This was quite the interesting conversation, and I hope that we'll have more conversations as improvements happen and as there are more guidelines and legislations for us to walk through. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And on a personal level, I also expect to see like clear legislation, local and international, and clear regulatory requirements. And I know that I should be afraid to say that because, you know, once you want something, you desire something, you'll have it. And on the legislation, at least in Europe, I can bet that will happen. But now on a more serious level, I think that this is really important to have it and to have it in time, because as you all mentioned, it's really hard to get back once some data, for example, is already into a system, and to replace or to try to mitigate that risk. And as I mentioned, we have a lot of for the moment unmitigated threats that we need to look out carefully. So in the ending, I would also like to thank everybody for your participation. I would like to thank our speakers for taking the time and presenting this really valuable information. And I would also like to thanks to the public for their time. I know it's a bit late for us here in Romania. So thank you so much for being with us tonight. And also I want to thank to Cloud Security Alliance and Cloud Security, the Romanian chapter, and our colleagues that supported this event. And I hope to continue this series of events that are dedicated to different papers and research from Cloud Security Alliance, and to see you in the next event. And please reach out if you still have any question, or if there is like some more information that you need to have from the links from the presentation. I'll also try to share the presentation itself. Thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye bye.